What a miserable day in the fine city. The rain is pouring down. I think there's some weather warnings relating to that as well. So what better way than to sit inside and watch me and Paddy chat our usual nonsense about Norwich City. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Whether you're joining us on Facebook, on YouTube or on X, welcome. And it is going to be however long it is. I don't think we've got a set time this afternoon, but we are going to obviously talk about the January transfer window where Norwich City currently find themselves, as well as previewing a little bit of that FA Cup tie on Sunday. Don't let that catch you out. 2:30 kickoff at Carrow Road against League Two side Walsall, which is going to be interesting. And we want your comments, questions, takes as well. We're going to be running through our 11s for that game and maybe the changes that we can foresee making. But yeah, any questions at all on anything Norwich City, then get them in. Whether, as I said, whatever platform you're watching in, if you're watching this live, get them in, and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can over the next period or so. Paddy, how are you? It's very miserable outside. Thankfully, we're inside doing this.
Yeah, no, I walked down to the fine city, so I had 30 minutes in the rain, but it wasn't too heavy, if I'm honest. It wasn't Storm. Was it Storm Guetti? Is that the latest one, Guetta or something like that? Yeah, I mean, as everybody probably knows by now, I have strong connections to Coventry. My sister their power went off for about 3 hours last night because I think the West Midlands got a little bit of a heavy part of that, along with the Southwest. Saw the news last night, 99-mile-an-hour wind. So what's a bit of rain in that context? But no, we're all good. And I don't think you'll need to get your shovel out for Sunday. Let's put it that way.
Oh, let's hope I don't need to as well. That would not be good. But yeah, I don't think I will, thankfully. Although I think there are going to be some snow showers along the way. But anyway, you didn't come here to listen to us speak about the weather. We're here to speak about all things Norwich City on the transfer front. And I mean, let's be honest about it in terms of where we currently sit. There's not too much publicly knocking about. We know Norwich are active. They've completed the signing of Ali Ahmed, and we've got a video out now with a Canadian journalist speaking about him that you can go and watch over on our YouTube channel after you've watched this, of course. But that's there for you to get some insight on him. Paddy, just kind of explain where we are, because it kind of feels, I think, to a lot of people like there's been a little bit of a lull since then. I think maybe there was an expectation that Norwich would burst out of the traps. I guess to an extent, it's probably a reality of the window that we are in at the moment, the January window. We hear about it. I remember Stuart Webber absolutely loathing this window and everything that it kind of represented during his time as sporting director. It's a very, very difficult window to do business in, and one that quite often the business that is done happens late, as we saw last year with Rory McConville, and then, of course, Jacob Wright, which was very, very late.
Yeah, I mean, that comment there, I think, does cut to the heart of this. There has to be, even with the Atanasio's on board now, a finite amount of financial commitment this window. And, they've already committed funds to bring Ali Ahmed in. And we know it would seem now that the focus is zoning in on a 10 and a centre mid. Maybe slightly surprisingly, not another wide player, but I think now they've seen Papagiallo ever closer to being back involved. That seems to have slipped down the pecking order. So is there an element there that, they have a certain amount of money that they can commit to, and until potential targets maybe fall into those ranges, which, as you rightly say, Connor, tends to happen towards the back end of a window. I think they were quite proactive to go and get out the traps as soon as they did. I haven't looked across the Championship more broadly, but I'd be surprised there was many clubs who were as quick as them in bringing in the first deal of the window. So, as you say, a very difficult trading window given the breadth of 4 weeks as opposed to what it is over the summer, the lack of player availability. There's clubs either trying to push up the leagues or stay at the level they are to avoid going further down the league. So that player availability is a major issue in January. There's no doubt about it. And so in that context, I don't. Yes, the rumour mill maybe isn't really cranking into life, and that's no bad thing from what we do for a living, I have to be honest. But I think they have been quite proactive so far. We're 9 days in now, and they've clearly, it's not a scattergun approach. It never is under Ben Knapper. Norwich are now looking at two specific areas of Philippe Clement's squad. You can be sure have distilled that down to, I don't know, a short list, shall we say, in both those positions. And now it's just between now and 31st. Is it 31st of Jan, Connor, that it closes?
I reckon a fair bit goes on till, even longer.
Yeah. So I mean, you've still got the thick end of 3 weeks now to get that business done. Of course, the counter argument is, well, particularly where they are in terms of their league status, the sooner those players are in the building, the better. And yes, that is the ideal scenario, but hypothetically, you've targeted a 10 and you can't really get him out of his current club until they're in the window, then you're not moving down the list if you're getting enough encouragement that that's a deal that can be made. So, yeah, I agree. It feels quiet, but I think generally it feels quiet. I'm not seeing massive amounts. I mean, Man City have done the big deal, haven't they, in the last 24 hours for Semenyo? But that aside, it doesn't feel generally at the top end of the game in this country. There's a lot happening right now. So, whether that will pick up, you would expect it will towards the back end of the window. But for me, this feels like a normal January cycle, really. It's not, if you contrast it with the summer when Norwich went absolutely crazy. I mean, what was it? It was just that the hinges on that revolving door were having to get repaired on numerous occasions because of the volume of in and out business. It's never going to be that. It never has been that. Look at every January window. And even if you go back to this time last year, I mean, Jurasek comes in, but that was a summer edition that they were able to do earlier because of the rather clever way they navigated the ESC and the GBE sort of permitted slots. But that wasn't a deal that they were looking to do in January to have an impact in January. And Wright and McConville, well, how late did they go? Because, Jacob Wright, for example, I think he was pretty much Swansea bound. And then Norwich have nipped in that last 24, 48-hour spell when they got a sense that there could be an opportunity there. So this is what happens. This is what happens in every transfer window, but maybe magnified in January because of that lack of player availability. So, yeah, I think we can say with certainty that they'd like to do 2 more, and then that would probably be it in terms of incomings. Senior-wise, we know there's this Irish winger, Luke Chukwu, who they're going to bring in and hopefully add to their academy, and he, as we're led to believe, checked in this morning. He's flying to England today, so that could accelerate over the weekend. But at first-team level, I think now Ahmed's in the building, they'll try and do 2 more. And as always, let's hope that nobody comes for their main players and they don't have decisions to make. Because I'm sure Philippe Clement, he knocked down the Josh Sargent thing when he was put to him at QPR. He does not want to lose him. And for him, you can read any of his key frontline players. He knows that his chances of keeping his club in the division improve dramatically if you can keep your best players and then add 2 in this window. So that would lead you to think that hopefully, apart from the ones on the fringes who aren't playing, who maybe will be allowed to go, whether in terms of permanence or temporary deals to the end of the season, you hope it will be relatively quiet from this point. Now, whether Norwich fans are crying out for more, I'm sure they are. I'm sure we're crying out for more because, you want as many additions to a squad. But I think we have to be all realistic, and every sense we get is that it's not going to be hold on to your horses, and there's going to be players coming through at every couple of days, and they're going to be getting linked left, right, and centre. I think they're very clear 2 areas in the attacking third. As Clement has said, creativity is what he's after, and that's what they're looking now to add.
Yeah, and well, first and foremost, thanks for all the comments and questions that are flooding in, and they are flooding in. So I can see those, and we will come to those in just a bit, and there'll be some stuff that we touch upon that kind of it links to some of those questions. So we'll drip those in as and when we can. But I guess that's the nature of January, Paddy, isn't it? By nature of what it is, mid-season typically is that it's a more reactive window. Certainly, if you're shopping in a UK-based market, the reason Ali Ahmed made a lot of sense, and I think he's quite an intelligent deal. Whether it will be the right deal and whether he'll be the right player obviously remains to be seen. But the MLS season was over. This is a different kind of trading window for them. There was a contractual situation there in terms of him being in his last 12 months that they could really push on, and clearly the player wanted to come to Norwich as well. So kind of a perfect storm in that sense that allowed them to move early. Clearly a lot of those dominoes that need to fall on other players, as you mapped out there, don't fall this early typically in a January window. I think Lewis Dobbin was done on the 3rd last season, which again was a little bit of a loan. But then you go to Jurasek, which I think was mid-Jan, and McConville and Wright last season, which were late Jan. That kind of shows how difficult a window and an opportunity this can be because of those factors you mentioned. Clubs mid-season are going to be reluctant to sell players. Even if they are, then there can be something that changes, an injury, a situation, a suspension, a game, a performance, and suddenly your mind can be changed. And I think you've got to appreciate Norwich's position as well. Let's be honest about it. They're in the bottom 3 in the Championship. They're not going to be the most attractive proposition for a lot of players. They might not even be the number 1, number 2 choice for some of the players looking to make a move this January. So a lot of those players may well be holding out for something else heading deeper into the month. And that is the situation that they are in. And I guess, Paddy, to kind of umbrella all of this conversation about, and we'll go on to kind of the positions that kind of you highlighted there. But the reality is the reason Norwich are kind of trying to get through the thorns of a January transfer window is because of the situation they find themselves in, and because of that work in the summer that maybe they didn't quite get right, and the balance that they didn't quite get right. I mean, there's a feeling in the game that this is kind of a period where you fix your squad and you kind of, polyfiller. You find bits for the holes that are left. And clearly, Norwich City have probably more than a few, but definitely a few glaring holes that need to be fixed in the coming weeks. And hopefully Ali Ahmed is the start of that. But that's the nature of where they are now. The margins of error are slim. They probably aren't as attractive a proposition as they were in the Championship. And it's a very difficult market. Add that all together, it's a hell of a balancing act they've got to strike this month.
Yeah, and I mean, Ali Ahmed spoke about that in his club interview, that for him, they're a top six rather than a bottom six side, and he had no, there was nothing in the jeopardy that other players might look at and feel that put him off. Clearly, I mean, he sees this as a real opportunity now to come into Europe as a market and prove his worth, and then maybe back himself to go on if he really shines in a Norwich shirt. But you'd be very naive if you didn't think that there will be targets who look at Norwich and draw the opposite conclusion and think, well, okay, yeah, I like maybe what Ben Knapper's telling me, or Lee Dunn as the head of recruitment, or maybe even Clement if it went that far. But the reality tells me this is a club and a squad who are banging trouble. In 6 months' time, I'm in League One. That's not where players that Norwich are looking to target, you would think, would be benchmarking their careers. They're looking for the likes of Ahmed, who's hopefully on an upward trajectory. And as such, that unfortunately is an inheritance that Clement has had to deal with from the previous incumbent, and the fact that this isn't a squad who are maybe just in touching distance of the top six. This is the complete opposite, really. And I suppose there's the financial lever you can pull, but again, I don't get the sense Mark Atanasio would be sanctioning to Ben Knapper pay over the odds to get players through the door because they're reticent about joining a relegation battle. I think that would. You're
also stuck with them as well if they're not players that kind of fit in with you. And this is the
very short position. Yeah,
when you look at where they are in terms of their strategy, their position in the table, it is naturally going to be a very small pool of players that are either going to be available or willing or both this month, and that's got to be what they've got to try and find.
That is the reality, yeah, and that doesn't lend itself to being. Getting the business done that they want early. I think that's the reality. Because, there's other clubs, probably other clubs in the Championship, who financially they can meet whatever Norwich can meet, but they can also, on the footballing side, maybe offer said targets, Championship playoff pushes, maybe even automatic promotion pushes. It's you'd have to be very persuasive to try and. Of course, Norwich. Ahmed talked about it. There is a cachet around Norwich, and maybe a perception that they are one of those clubs who when they're in the Championship, should be competing at the top end of the table and hopefully getting into the Premier League. But the reality in the here and now, and players and their representatives can see it. They can see the struggles. They probably look at. To take your point there, Connor, about maybe where Norwich have got it wrong recruitment-wise last summer, maybe even previous windows under Ben Knapper, because that all culminates in a club fighting at the wrong end of the table. And maybe they are reticent. Maybe it does make them stop and think. So, what it doesn't do is make the task any easier in what is notoriously a very difficult month anyway. So, but that said, there was plenty of interest in Ahmed. He was getting linked to Schalke, wasn't he? I think, who I know aren't top tier in Germany anymore, but are a big name nevertheless in German football.
Well, top of the second tier, so potentially Bundesliga football next year.
And I'm sure there was other maybe English-based options. He was quite candid that the MLS season, which for him went right to the death when they played into Miami, Vancouver in the MLS Cup, only ended 3 weeks ago, but he only took a week or so off because he felt there was an opportunity coming. So he must have known. That tells me that there was plenty of interest from Europe. So in that context, Norwich have clearly done their homework and were able to persuade him. And you hope that can repeat itself for these other two areas of the squad that they want to improve. I think the Clement factor is a big factor. He does have a name in European circles, clearly. And Ali Ahmed, I thought, referenced that in some of his opening remarks, that the opportunity to work with a coach who's managed at some big clubs across Europe and has a reputation for improving players was very attractive. So Norwich clearly need to lean into the Clement factor for me. The headwinds are pretty adverse in the here and now, but just look at what the uplift he has had in the period he's been here, and then it, back him to drive this club forward, as we all hope, away from relegation danger over the months that come. And then it's a chance to almost start anew again this summer. But we have to be honest, not every player is going to want to come here, roll their sleeves up, and effectively fight in a relegation battle. And there's a lot of players who won't fancy that, and it doesn't matter how much money you offer them. That's the reality of it. Because, to repeat myself, what player with ambitions to play higher than Norwich wants the threat of being in League One in 6 months? Not too many.
Yes, or they're going to want paying pretty handsomely for the privilege as well, which adds another layer of it. So all of these kind of different elements make this a really difficult window. But at the same time, you can kind of sit there and moan that it's a difficult window, or you can get on with it. And the reality is Norwich are in this position because of the decisions that they've taken previously. Why is there no creativity in the squad? Well, they sold their most creative outlet to their local rivals in the summer. I don't want to poke at old wounds, but that is the case. That's why they find themselves in this situation now. So yeah, and clearly that was a deal that was sanctioned at the time in terms of some of that finance being made available in January. So we'll see how that unfolds. I mean, in terms of those positions, Paddy, clearly one winger in the building. I think the sort of common general consensus, and I think we kind of spoke about this a little bit, is they probably needed more than one winger this month. I kind of felt they did. Are you surprised that they've kind of settled upon Ahmed being likely? Again, could change if there was movement elsewhere, but at this stage, we're not expecting Norwich City to go and add another winger at this stage.
Yes, and even like a week ago, so the sense you got from Philippe Clement was that he would accept another wide addition this window. So I don't know, but reading between the lines, the centre mid seems to have come up the pecking order, and maybe that second winger has dropped down a touch. Is that a reflection that, well, they've looked at it, and obviously McLean and Maatsen are being flogged in terms of their minutes. You haven't got Topic anymore. Liam Gibbs still has to prove his fitness, really. Jacob Wright, until they do a 10, seems to be having to operate in that area of the pitch. So does that, or has it become more of a priority? Could there even be summer centre mids they've looked at and maybe feel that they can bring them forward like they did with Jurasek? Like they did because it was his birthday a few days ago. Kenny McLean, if you go way back to that window, he came in from Aberdeen for a nominal fee when he was due to come in the summer of that year. So is that in play? We'll find out in due course. But I suppose you look at it, and left-hand side now, you've got Ahmed, you've got Papagiallo, and you've got, because he's played there most of the season, Oscar Schwartau. So, that's 3 for one position. You'd take that. And then the other side, where it's a bit more of a gamble for me, you've got Jurasek, Joven. If Josh Sargent's going to be here beyond January and he's leading the line, then he's not going to play with 2 up top. Does he play in the middle behind him? I don't think he does. I don't think he has the game yet for that in terms of his general play. So right-hand side of a 3 is where he comes into that mix. And then you've got the likes of, Springett. You've got the likes of Mankwa Forsen who've been tried there. I'm not passing judgment on any of those are really good right-sided options. I would have my doubts, if I'm honest, because none of them feel to me natural right-sided players. Jurasek, okay, but he's still picking it up from a very low base, and we need to see a bigger sample of him now in terms of starts before you get comfortable in the sense that, okay, well, yeah, he can almost nail down the right-hand side of the 3. But the people who matter in this equation, which was Clement, which is Knapper, which is Dunn, it would seem at this stage of January's window, with that caveat that always opportunities can present themselves that you're maybe not expecting. But right now, it would seem that they feel in those 2 key areas that this is the roster they want to go with between now and May. And it's interesting. My team have done 2 wide players in recent days. They've done Roman Esse, who's a very good player at this level. Yeah. Went from Millwall to Palace, hasn't really managed to break in at Palace. He's come in on loan. They've got a lad from Tottenham whose name escapes me now, but he has been out on loan elsewhere. And we go over to just over the festive period, the Watford game, the Stoke game. What decided those 2 games at Carrow Road? Wide players. In Watford's case, the guy they brought on, Iran Kunda. Sorba Thomas for Stoke. It increasingly feels to me, so maybe it's just a championship thing, maybe it's football more broadly, but those wide areas, the way that the game is going now, are absolutely key, I think. And that's why, no doubt, Clement wanted to make an addition in that area, but that would seem to be all they're willing to do in that area in this window. So time will tell, but you have to be concerned for me. I mean, I'll bowl it back to you, Connor, but I look at it, I've mapped out there the options in left and right. That right-hand side, for me, is still a huge question mark.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I can kind of see both sides because, as you mapped out there, I think we have to put Jovan Makama into this conversation in that, because ultimately with Josh Sargent fit, I wrote a piece on this. I know there's been a lot of discussion around dropping Josh Sargent. I just don't see in what world Norwich City would do that at this moment in time, given their situation in the league, and a player of his quality. All right, he didn't play that well against Stoke, admittedly, but I don't think he was the only one in that team that didn't. But then if he is going to play, you need to get Makama minutes. That's likely to come on the right. So then do you sign another right winger? I don't know. Then you're kind of blocking pathways for Jurasek. And you mentioned Oscar Schwartau. I know has played predominantly off the left, but clearly both sides, I think, could play there. Going further down the ranks, I mean, AJ Tavares, whether he's here or whether he's not, he's here at the moment. He's in the building. Elliot Miles. There are wide players in there, lower down the order, that I'm sure they are mindful of not bringing in players to kind of come and block pathways for. Now, what that doesn't for me, and this is kind of where I've sat on it, exclude, is maybe a loan option, a kind of wild card option for the rest of the season that in the short term gives you maybe a little bit of a boost and a different option, a different profile in that area as well. But by the same token, isn't one that long term then restricts you and hampers some of those pathways that we've spoken about. That to me feels like maybe the way to do it. That's what I thought they'd do. I thought they'd go one permanent and one on a loan deal. I mean, Diallo, when he's played, I think it's fair to say he showed some bright moments, but if he comes back, and then I think we need to see more from him in terms of productivity and output beyond just that raw pace. And him and Ahmed, without watching Ahmed play, feels like quite similar profiles. So it would have been nice, I think, just to have a different one, maybe a younger one, a younger kind of Premier League one. It would that for me would have felt like a better balance, kind of similar to what they did, I guess, with Dobbin last season. Between now and the end of the season, that would give them depth. It would give them a different option. It would increase maybe some more kind of natural options in that area of the pitch, as opposed to maybe crowbarring an Oscar Schwartau out there. Obviously, Emanuel Forson has played out there as well. He's injured, so there's another option for you. So I think that's probably the conclusion they've come to, Paddy, in terms of you look at the players who Diallo to come back, Forson to come back, Jurasek, Schwartau, Ahmed. There are, in terms of numbers, a lot of bodies there. It's just, I guess, from where they're at the moment, is there enough quality there? Is there enough options there to really change a championship game?
And I guess this is the element where you've got to back the judgment of Clement primarily, but the people around him. That he's been in the building long enough to make some decisions. Yes, there'll be players who hasn't had a real first look at, and Jallo would fit into that category. But he knows him full well. He's talked in the past about he was a player he was well aware of and liked, and felt his profile could add to what he's trying to do. As has been to this point, effectively inherited a group of players almost trying to decode or deconstruct what the previous head coach was trying to do with that group in and out of possession. So the next part of this rebuild is a team cast in his image rather than his predecessors, and I get the clear sense that Jallo is quite a key part of that, and obviously the fact they've added Ahmed as well. They are interchangeable, left and right flank. So there's nothing to suggest that you couldn't operate with those two in terms of wide areas and with the inverted nature of the game as it is now. So I guess what it comes down to also is, we've had a 10-15 segment here in the wide areas of the squad, but Philippe Clement has clearly identified 10 they're light and the centre mid they're light. So it maybe isn't. We don't want to do another winger. It's just the priority now has to be these other two areas. And if that is the case, then, maybe that's one they revisit in the summer when, again, he'll have built up another body of knowledge around the players in the building. And really then he has a much bigger pool of players in terms of summer window to go and address that. I think for now I look at it and, the fact that Jacob Wright had to be almost reinvented to a degree and put into that 10 role. And he's the only one who's really stood his hand up for me. I mean, Marcondes has had a little go, but not really. Chris Gordon, doesn't feel, I don't think he necessarily fits the 10 role. And Makama, I don't think his all-round game is at the level it needs to be. So for that position. So I think it's less about Philippe Clement needs to be convinced they need to do another wide option in this window, and more about there's priorities in other areas of the squad or the team now that need to be addressed with a matter of urgency, I think.
Yes, and I guess this leans in slightly to this point around generally around loan players. Surely loan route for 2 players, we haven't used our allowance at all. Are we not better throwing money at it? At least then the relegation position isn't an issue for the player, which is kind of the point that we raised. But I guess it's a trade-off, isn't it, Paddy? Because there are pros and cons to loan deals. We've seen some really good loans at Norwich over the years. We've seen in equal measure probably as many not so good loans that haven't worked. You know, Darren mentioned Marquinhos a couple of years ago, which I think Ben Knapper was actually across in his not that I want to blame him for everything, but I think he was across.
Just stop you there, Connor. Sidney Van Hooydonk.
Yeah, also he was definitely across that one. So it's not an exact science in that, but I guess clubs would always say, well, they want permanent additions because then they're developing their own player. They're not developing a player for someone else. You're not look at Huddersfield maybe as an example with Leo Castledine at the moment, who looks borough bound. You know, they spent 6 months kind of developing a player and they're going to get no reward for that. So that's kind of the trade-off that you make. And then it's, I guess, another point of, well, do you want to use that development time on a loan player, or do you actually want to use it on some of the players that you've invested heavily in who are of a similar age and similar profile within your own squad, hopefully then get the benefits down the line? So, and just to kind of, I guess, conclude the wide area conversation around this, which is why I flashed this comment up, is, you know, loan fees are a thing, and particularly in January they can be quite high depending on the profile of the player as well. Any resource that you use, I guess, which I think was the point that you made, Paddy, on that position, is then resource that you don't make on perhaps 2 of the other positions that you want. And I mean, moving on to those, I mean, I would agree, particularly the system that Clement plays, it feels like probably a specialist number 10 is something that they are lacking at the moment. I think if we were to draw it down in terms of just position, that we could say with absolute definitive or definition that they've got, it's Emi Marcondes, who's the only kind of out and out 10 that we would say. I know Jacob Wright has been pushed there, and others have been pushed in there as well, but they haven't got kind of that creative 10 type, Wes Hoolahan type that maybe we would naturally associate with that position.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. Yeah, and albeit it's a sparse sample of names that have been linked, but the ones I'm seeing are more centre mids, DMs. I can't think off the top of my head in the last week or 2 we've seen too much number 10 action. So that's gone very deep in terms of their recruitment search at the moment. But, you know, that will change, and there's, you know, absolutely no doubt that is a position now of some urgency that they want to address. And we'll see where they go with it. But you know, when you hear 10s, you think, well, there's a lot of different types of 10, you know, across the game as well. So even that, drilling into that, you know, is it somebody who they want to be that connector of midfield and forward line, or to have actually that? And I'm, you know, as I'm talking here, I'm thinking of the main man, Mr. Buendia, but who can offer. And I'm not saying don't stop. I'm not saying he's coming back anytime soon, sadly for Norwich. But he had a tremendous goals/assists ratio as well. You know, where do you put the measure? You know, it's very interesting. There's lots of subsets for number 10s for me, and those players aren't in huge supply if you look across the game, really, and particularly ones, again, keep coming back to the same point, who would be available for Norwich in this window. So I think that's quite a tricky strand to recruitment in this window for Norwich, to have to go and get a 10, because that's quite a specialist profile that they're looking for there, really. And you know, because they have to come in and they have to be able to knit with different types of wide players, which we've discussed here. Even the forwards, you know, Chris Gordon is probably a slightly different player to Sargent, and Makama slightly different again. So they have to be quite versatile, quite flexible, and you know, that intrigues me. You know, where they, well, yeah, there you go, another example. You know, you wouldn't put Buendia and Stiepermann necessarily in the same bracket, but equally in their own way, hugely effective number 10s for Norwich. So that underlines the point that you know, this one for me. And this, I think, I mean, the CM is the CM, but I think that it's clear that Maatsen and McLean, are they're fit and available, they are his first choice. Yeah. So if they do a CM, I don't see that necessarily in the short term as somebody to dislodge McLean or Maatsen, but actually to provide some backup. But the 10, you could see, as you've said rightly, Connor, Marcondes is probably the only 10 you would say in that squad, naturally 10. The 10 they identify in this window and bring in has got to hit the ground running because they needed to go straight into that team and unlock that creative potential. So really intriguing which direction they go. I mean, we know, well, proven with Ahmed, they're being very creative in terms of what markets they're looking at. Again, we know Belgium's a focus for them, and that's probably Clement, I would imagine, with his input. But we know that's a league that they've took a keen interest in this window for those remaining targets, and time will tell what develops. But yeah, I mean, the fact that there hasn't been any links at all that I've seen, or any soundings really that we've heard towards a 10 name would suggest that that's something that's going to be quite a slow burner, I think. And is it? I mean, it's interesting one on the loan route. I mean, the more I think about that, that's certainly a subject we'll bowl at. We're down at Colney tomorrow with Philippe Clement. He's doing his pre-Walsall press. So I think hopefully that's an area he's willing to sort of engage on because, as you made it quite clear, he's not going to get too heavily into speculation. But just in terms of his approach to the loan market, is it something he's willing to countenance? Does he see that blocking pathways as an issue? I mean, if we get a sense from what he says on that, that may give us a bit more of an idea what the broader thinking is recruitment-wise in terms of 10 and centre mid for the rest of this window.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to go down, and this is not based on any knowledge, but I'm saying if I had to do it, and if I was sat in that chair, kind of the type of profile that I would be looking for purely on age, I think with that 10, you'd want them to be more prime, wouldn't you? Maybe a sort of Ahmed age profile in that, somebody who, like you say, is ready to plug in and play, and he's ready to hopefully hit the ground running, but certainly kind of try and be a big player in those areas. I don't have a specific name around that. I'm sure other people would be able to drop some in, but that kind of feels to me like the type of profile that they need in that area. And then, as you say, there are loads of different 10s. I would imagine the way Clement wants to play it would probably be one who's got legs and is able to press, and also probably has an eye for a pass. I think those are probably the three things I would look at. And then for that midfielder, I could probably see someone maybe similar to a profile of a Jacob Wright, who, like you say, is maybe not going to be one for the absolute here and now, given I think Maatsen and McLean have grabbed that position. But clearly, as robotic and machine-like as they've been over the festive period with the minutes that they have played, we know Kenny's been struggling with some issues. Pelle Maatsen clearly is not going to be able to maintain that kind of level of games. You wouldn't imagine at some point they're going to need to be rotated out and play slightly differently. To have kind of a younger one in there that they can develop and that they can try and bring forward in the long term maybe feels a little bit more likely to me as maybe the type, Paddy. So I don't know how you kind of see those positions in terms of profile, but that's kind of what I could see.
Well, yeah, I mean, and obviously the way you've mapped out the second profile there, younger, that is very much the template, and that's what they're looking to do. You mentioned Wright, throw in Rory McConville. The thrust of what Ben Knapper will try and do this window, which he did in the summer, and all the other windows since he's been in the building, bar maybe that first one with Van Hooijdonk, is to develop an asset base. And we know we don't need to. We know the playbook now. It's in the shorter term to improve Norwich's standing, and then in the longer term, those high ceilings that Norwich can harvest uplift in terms of resale value. And one of the first pronouncements he came out with when he first walked through the door just over 2 years ago, we need to lower the age profile of this squad. And you could debate whether that's happened too fast and too quickly in terms of the sort of erratic nature of the progress on the pitch. Obviously, the head coach selections is all part of that equation. But nevertheless, it's very clear Ben Knapper's not rowing back on that. Any players who come in this window will be tipping towards the younger element. But I'd agree with you. I think that's fine, maybe for the centre mid, but the 10, I think, needs to be somebody with a body of games under their belt, and a track record that they can come in, because it is the situation they're in is quite desperate, and they're not going to be able to bring somebody to the club who needs to get up to speed, a la Jacob Wright last January, a la Rory McConville. and then it's only the back end of the season. The horse may have bolted by then. So, yeah, I don't think it's too big an exaggeration to state that this 10 search could hold the key to a lot of what happens between now and May, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. Let's rattle through some questions before we come on to the final couple of points. And this is kind of what we've said all along, really, from Martin. Desperately need a creative attacking midfielder to feed Sergeant McCarthy. But where do you find that quality player in January and within our budget? Therein is the challenge that Ben Knapper, Lee Dunn, and the recruitment team have this window. And it is a difficult one, but as we said, it's one that is of really their own making. The fact that they are here having to navigate that, and that's a point that DD Norwich 13 has made on YouTube. Afternoon boys, it's all well and good signing wingers and attacking midfielders in January. Why were they not sorted in the summer when it was so obvious? One that I think we can knock down, this one from Finley on Pierre Duomma, who hopefully I've said that right. It's come up a couple of times. One that Clement knows from Genk. Anything in him? I can from a profile perspective, I could kind of see that. But Paddy, you kind of found some reports today that suggest that he's heading elsewhere. And certainly from our understanding, if he is on a list somewhere, it's not towards the top of that list at this stage.
No. I mean, he would seem like naturally he would be on a list because he does fit the profile for maybe one of those positions. But I think the reports today, I think he might be Turkey-bound Goztep. I butchered that pronunciation, apologies. But and he's an interesting one because I did a bit of research on him earlier. I mean, he's he's had a couple of bad thigh injuries and not really kicked the ball for Watford. But the Belgian sort of under-21 international, that's probably where the Clement sort of momentum behind that link came from to a degree. But no, I mean, you checked in and earlier in the week, and it wasn't a name that maybe was very high on any given lists in terms of the recruitment people at Norwich. And now in the last 24 hours or so, it looks like he may be Turkey bound. So I think we can put a line through that one.
And the other one is Mark Leonard as well. I think we can put a line through that one, can't we?
Yeah, that would seem seemed very heavily agent led to me, that Norwich were getting lumped in with one or two other clubs. Who knew that they would do those sort of things around this time of the window? I see Gabby Zara's agent must be working him very hard because he's getting linked with 3 or 4 Premier League clubs.
Off the Premier League, yeah.
Yeah, I did check that, Con. I think it's a 10% sell-on for Norwich over and above any profit, which you would hope would be the case. So, maybe there'll be a nice little windfall there on the Brazilian maestro. But but going back to Leonard, I think I noticed he wasn't in they played Coventry last time out and he wasn't in the squad. So that almost tells you that, he's clearly not going to be featuring at Birmingham the second part of the season. But you could see quite a few Championship clubs being looking at him. Good pedigree, came through at Brighton and didn't quite make it there. Maybe a little bit like McConville, but for me, that probably, I mean, the sense is again similar to Duomo. Probably not one who they're actively looking at, but maybe one they would have clearly when they did their profile work. Prior to the window opening, he would have appeared because he's a Championship grade defensive midfielder who hasn't been getting a look in and might be available, seemingly is available. But I think there's talk around it. It might be a loan, mightn't it? I don't think there's a permanent deal to be done there. So loops back to maybe where Norwich are in terms of doing loans if they can do permanence.
Yes, a couple of points, and just on this one from Rob about the goalkeeper, I don't see a situation where Norwich going for a goalkeeper this month, given they signed free in the summer. And I think it was a pretty stern defence of Vladan Kovacevic a couple of weeks ago from Philippe Clement. I maybe don't necessarily agree that it's mistakes every week, but there are clearly weaknesses to his game that require some work. And I'm sure that Declan Rudd and Ricardo Pereira, as the 2 goalkeeping coaches, are working hard on all of those aspects. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can make those changes, because if not, then I could certainly see a case where that becomes more of a conversation point among fans heading into the summer, regardless of what division Norwich are in. Paddy, in terms of Ben Knapper, clearly has faced a lot of criticism this season. A lot of Norwich fans at plenty of stages have made their feelings known in terms of what they would have liked to have happened, whether they've changed their minds or in many cases haven't changed their mind. He's leading January. He's here. He is overseeing that window at the moment that Norwich are in. How big is this? Maybe it seems an obvious question, but it's been asked it a few times, and maybe I'll flash some of those comments up about whether we are in kind of last chance saloon for him now, because clearly it was not the summer window that Norwich would have liked, even if that goes on to be very successful in the years ahead. I'm trying to find the exact comment. There was one about whether it was the last chance for him, so I'll try and find that as and when you're speaking. But it's kind of a valid question, I guess, one that he acknowledged in terms of his own position, because in terms of sporting directors and what they can do, they have very limited points at which they can actively affect things that happen on the pitch. He's kind of pulled one of those levers in making a managerial change, and clearly a January transfer window is the other opportunity that he has, really. And then it's over to Philippe Clement, and kind of you cross your fingers and hope that he's able and capable to get Norwich City out of the situation they're in. So it's a big month for him again, isn't
it? Yeah, they're all big months for him now, I think, in terms of his Norwich status. I mean, we periodically get to speak to him, and I don't mean just in front of the cameras as well, but away from the cameras, and he would maintain that he thinks, if we're zoning in on the recruitment element and his work in these windows since he took the job, that they have signed good players. He's adamant they have signed good players. He doesn't seek to defend the fitness areas around that, and we know that whole aspect of keeping players fit, rehabbing them properly, making them available to successive head coaches is areas of concern that have prompted external audits. And obviously Mark Attanasio had to wade in on that when he came over and did the Radio Norfolk sit down. So, but he is adamant, they are two separate things. There's quite rightly those question marks around the fitness and what isn't happening in terms of the sports science, maybe in the medical provision around these players, and they're trying to work at getting to the bottom of that moving forward. But he feels Chris Gordon's a good signing. There's a case study there. We just haven't seen him get the opportunity yet, maybe to prove that. And obviously that was partly injury, and now it would seem Philippe Clement remains to be convinced a little bit, allied to Jovan Makama stepping forward. But that might be his opinion, but where will that all be judged? It'll be judged on the pitch. And if this season is one of, as it would seem to be, a desperate fight to just keep their heads above water, that isn't what the stated aim was before a ball was kicked. So if you want to measure that, then that will be quite an epic failure, let's be honest. The fact that he's had to, now dispense with another head coach that he personally selected, and he's on to his third head coach now in just over 2 years. None of that looks like a good record. So I think, and again, it's only a personal opinion, but I could see a scenario in the summer, they stay up and maybe those above him look at it and feel that maybe that's the time maybe to make a change in that area. And it might be something that might be partly Ben, feeling that, okay, it's got to the point where maybe he needs to move on now. And, he wants, I'm sure, to go on and achieve things in the game in this pathway that he's taken from where he was at Arsenal. So could I see a parting of the ways in the summer? I could, but equally, things might turn and, some of these players that he has signed in windows past really come to the fore over this 6-month period. Clement is able to really galvanise them and they go again and they finish comfortably in the mid to upper echelons of the table. And then it's a different mood, it feels, around the club. So there's a lot to play for, generally, clearly, primarily Norwich's league status, but also for Ben Knapper. But, I think there was plenty of fans who wouldn't have felt he should get another chance to make a head coach cycle, and equally, he shouldn't be driving this January window. He did get a chance to get another head coach cycle. He is driving this January window, so that tells you in the here and now he still retains the support, and Mark Attanasio has made that publicly clear of Norfolk Holdings. And if that is the case, then every day he's in the job, every week he's in the job. That's an opportunity to change people's minds and change people's opinions. But it feels like a long road back amongst many, many Norwich fans. We only have to go back. It's not that far ago to those protests and the vitriol directed towards him from large sections as it ended up inside Carrow Road towards the end of Liam Manning's tenure. So, but time will tell. But for me personally, I could easily see a scenario where you just get that breathing space in the summer, and then maybe there is a parting of the ways, but time will tell.
Yeah, it's a big month for him, and yeah, I'm sure a lot of people in that recruitment department, clearly, given their situation in the Championship. A couple of final questions on transfers, and then we'll move on and start to look ahead a little bit to that FA Cup game on Sunday against Walsall. Faith asking, any outgoings look to be happening? And again, like on the incoming perspective, I'm sure there will be some, but at the moment, very quiet. And of course, for a lot of them, they've got to let's be honest about it. They've got to find suitors, haven't they, for what they haven't done really at Norwich. And that is going to be the difficult scenario. And we spoke about this a lot in the summer with Shane Duffy and Soleimani at that stage. And those two, for example, are names that you could see if all the planets aligned and there was a suitor for them being allowed to leave this month. But those things have to happen. And then in terms of this from Kieran, any more news on the AJ Tavares to Barcelona links? Not currently. Again, that's a bit of a fluid situation in that he's not on a professional deal. So in theory, that Barcelona don't have to contact Norwich. They can just sign him, and that can be something that is arranged. And then obviously there would be compensation to be agreed subsequently. Obviously, I think a lot of Norwich fans saw that post that he put on social media this week, indicating that he trained with the first team, and obviously will remain to see whether that includes any involvement on Sunday. But as of yet,
on that point, am I right in saying that's not a January window cycle, is it?
Correct.
I mean that could happen February, March, April, May. So
correct.
There's no Barcelona et al. Must get this done before the end of January. That's not the case at all.
No, and equally, I think it's 17, isn't it? You can sign a pro deal. So, but he doesn't have to sign a pro deal at Norwich, so he could just wait it out. So there's no rush on his part either in terms of that. He could wait until the end of the season if he so wished. So yeah, no real urgency on that one. I suspect if it does happen, it could just be one where we all wake up one day and it's he's gone, which could well be the situation, and may well be the way that Norwich City find out as well, given the rules around that. And that's a whole another debate around it. Paddy, let's move on then. Let's look at this FA Cup game on Sunday. I know you're going to be in amongst the fans and with your little boy, which is going to be
words, Connor. Choose your words.
Yeah. It's going to be it's going to be an interesting perspective for you, and I'm guessing for those reasons you're probably very much up for the cup.
Oh, I definitely am. Yeah. What I don't want is 0-0 and then get beat on penalties, because that will kibosh a lot of things in my house. It won't be a very pleasant Sunday evening, that's for sure. But and obviously now with Ali Ahmed dropped into the mix, we don't know. I said it earlier, we'll go down and have a chat with Philippe Clement, funny enough, 24 hours, more or less to the minute, tomorrow. So keep it locked to the Picton channels for that. But you'd like to think that if he's trained okay and there's no issues there, that it's a great opportunity to just, if not for starting him, then get him in and around it. So that's a little subplot that I'm personally looking forward to seeing, and maybe one or two of these younger players who haven't had huge amounts of opportunities. Is that an opportunity I'd personally like to? I mean, I know we've done our 11s, and I'm preempting what you're going to do next, Connor. But Mahovo, I think he needs to get some game time. He looked very.
Well, I'll tell you what. You pause there, and I'll bring up your 11, and then you can talk through it. So let me do that, and then let me do that. So this is the 11. Hopefully, yeah, that is definitely Paddy's. That Paddy has gone for. So you've gone for Kovacic in goal, Stacey McConville, Cordoba, Mahovo, Matson and Wright as the midfield two, Jurasek, Marcondes and Ahmed behind Jovan Makama. So yeah, talk us through your picks there.
Well, I mean, I think Kellen Fisher probably has been flogged a little bit. Am I right in saying it's him, McConville and Matson and McLean, of those four who've played the most minutes over the festive period? So
correct.
I think Jack Stacey coming in probably offers a little bit more in terms of, you would expect Norwich will be, at least you'd hope anyway, would have the on the front foot dictating how that game goes. So Stacey's the more natural right-sided attacking option of those two. That makes a lot of sense. McConville, I'd keep him in. I just think he's going from strength to strength, and then likewise Cordoba. He alongside him against QPR, I thought they were very good. It was the type of game where probably Cordoba was going to excel. It was very physical. It was about athleticism and tracking back into channels. Might not necessarily be that tomorrow, but still I'd like to see a little bit more of that partnership. Nice balance to that. And Mahova, I think, I was just saying now, I thought he was a little bit off the pace against Stoke. Wasn't the only one, but just his decision making. And you could see Clement was getting a bit frustrated with him. there was a lot of turning to the bench and remonstrating with his coaches. So I think he's just a guy who needs to get some minutes now. And right in the 6, well, it seems like if they're going for a different option at the 10, that maybe Jacob Wright's longer term in Philippe Clement's eyes anyway is as a 6. So that's a good opportunity for him. He rests McLean. I think you're going to have to try and get some rest for either one of. And for me, it will be McLean because he's had these persistent fitness-related issues all season that he's managing and playing through. And then top end of the pitch, I'd start Ahmed. I'd start Jurasek again for the similar reasons to Mahova. He needs to be in now. He needs to be starting games. And he needs to be showing us what we all hope he is, which is, a player who can impact it at this level. And Makama, I just think... he's on such a crest of a wave that why wouldn't you want to keep that going? I mean, he will be, kind of the level that he's coming up against tomorrow is something he wouldn't be an accustomed to playing, at Lincoln in the lower league. So I think he could be a very good spearhead in this type of game if the service from the likes of Ahmed and Jurasek is on the money. He's already proven he's got that penalty box instincts, to get across his mark, get across the front post. And Marcondes, I think it feels a little bit, he's been a little bit unlucky. I didn't think he was the worst when he was tried in that 10 just before Christmas period. But, Clement has seen maybe something different and he hasn't really had much of a looking. So you would think in terms of a motivation factor, if he got a start tomorrow, Sunday, then he would be quite keen to put down a market, having clearly known that Norwich are in the market for a 10. So might be quite a clever bit of man management to give him an opportunity to maybe almost, right, okay, yeah, we're looking for a 10. Show us what you've got again. So I think I quite like that lineup. I think there's players who need to play, but there's also, you could debate whether Kovacevic needs to play, but I just think from a confidence point of view, he gets a clean sheet, they win the game. That doesn't hurt, does it? Because it feels like he's had quite a difficult festive spell again, not been helped a little bit by the players in front of him I'm thinking of the Stoke concessions particularly, but just, against it's probably, again, without having studied too much how Walsall are going to set up, but if they're going to be threats from set pieces and putting balls in the box, then that for me is a major area where he is lacking at the moment. And the more times he's exposed to that type of challenge and having players in and around him and trying to knock him off balance and basically upset him, the better, I think, because he's going to get plenty of that between now and the end of the season. Because you can be sure championship teams, when they're doing their analysis now, are looking at him and thinking, we can test him in that area of his craft. So he needs to come through that, and this might be a good opportunity for him. So that's how I would go, Connor. Have we got your 11?
We have his mind, so it's slightly different, but I think along a similar theme. So I have changed the goalkeeper like you. I could see the arguments for keeping Kovacevic in there and trying to keep that continuity. In fact, I think that's probably what he will do, but this is my starting 11 and what I've gone for. Callum Fisher, McConville, Cordoba, Crizene. I think that was the back four that played at QPR, who I thought were good. They were unlucky probably not to get a clean sheet on that occasion, maybe largely because down to Kovacevic, although we could point to the failure to clear the clearance initially. But I felt that back four showed a lot of promise, and I think where Norwich are at now, they need that continuity and some relationships beginning to form. So I'd go with that back four. I'd agree on Kenny McLean, and maybe I wouldn't hate to see Jacob Wright in there, but I think it's maybe an opportunity for Liam Gibbs in that position just to get some minutes. And then I've gone with Pelle Matson as well for the same reasons as you. Kenny McLean carrying a couple of knocks, and he's played a lot of football as well, so I could see him dropping out for this one. Jurasek, agree on the right again. Found let's not overhype it. There was some nice moments at QPR. I thought there was some nice, probably one or two, and I do mean one or two nice moments against Stoke in the first half last weekend. So I think you want to keep him and try and just give him a run of games to consistently get on it. I agree with nice to see Ahmed on the left. I think what that would allow you to do, hopefully, is push Oscar Svartau into more of a 10 position, which I would like to see him more central in and around Josh Sargent, who again I probably wouldn't hate to see Jovan Makama, but I think the reason I haven't included him is because obviously he had the illness, he had the knock. I think just giving him a clear week off doesn't feel like the worst thing for me. I probably wouldn't have him in the squad if I'm being completely honest, just to give him a complete week off of it. Josh Sargent needs goals, and then I think you could easily kind of do a 60-30 split and bring Mateus Chris-Goran on as well in the second half. Who knows? If Norwich are behind, they may well need both of them on the pitch as well together. So I think that's sort of our 11s and what we've gone for. I think what is let me get rid of that. What we have gone for, interestingly though, is quite a strong Norwich City 11. We've both gone quite strong, and that probably feels indicative of the way that Philippe Clement is going to go on Sunday. I don't think we're expecting, a completely changed 11 with lots of young players and fringe players. I think the feeling at the moment is that he's going to go quite strong for Sunday.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I say, we'll speak to him tomorrow. But when I initially bowled at him in the post-match against Stoke, he was very strong on it. He was saying, "Look, I'm already thinking about this game. It's not that I need to go away. This is now a priority for me. I don't see it as we need to sacrifice this because it's all about the championship and survival." No, he I think he said words to the effect of, "I want a winning culture, and I don't want players picking and choosing when they perform or when they turn up and when they put it in." So that all leads itself to thinking that there won't be wholesale changes. He will be playing a lot of his frontline players, and he does want to progress because he feels it's mutually beneficial for when it rolls on then to what on the paper looks a very difficult upcoming run of fixtures in the championship. And you can see the logic. What you don't hope is, of course, the dreaded sort of injuries intervene, and heaven forbid, one of those very, very key players plays on Sunday and gets a knock or worse. Then that decision would be open to scrutiny. But I'd prefer that. I'd prefer a head coach who it's not even treating the FA Cup with respect, but just understanding that it might be Walsall, it might be the FA Cup, but in Norwich's situation now, they're too inconsistent as it is. They can't turn it off and on like a tap and decide we're not going to really go through full tilt for this game, but we will pick it up again for, remind me who's the next, Wrexham away, isn't it? So, I prefer to have a head coach talking in those terms and that then being reflected in his lineup. But you do need to strike a balance because there are players with a lot of miles on the clock, particularly over this festive period we've just emerged from, and it would be reckless to put too many of them through this situation on Sunday. Maybe have them on the bench if required, but certainly in the 11. So I don't know. It's an interesting one. I'm trying to think back now to. We've got nothing to benchmark against him, have we? Because, he joined after the League Cup sort of ties. And so but I'll be surprised if there was, maybe anything over sort of 5 or 6 changes. That would seem to me to be flying in the face of the comments he came out with post-match against Stoke. So, of course, when we get down there tomorrow, he might hit us with X, Y, and Z or a fitness doubt. And so his hands are tied to a degree. And if that's the case, then so be it. But I think, I think you would like to hope that 1:30 when that team, or 1:15 when that team news drops on Sunday, that there's plenty of players who you would think would also be in the mix for the following weekend at Wrexham.
Yes, I would agree. And the way and he spoke about this after the game, to be fair, where Norwich are at, and I know you touched upon it as well. They need to win games. They need the feeling of winning games, and you probably want that feeling to be within those players that you expect to go to Wrexham. And I think the fact it's a clear week, there's no week game to worry about and whatnot, and they've had a clear week as well. And I know he didn't really appreciate the word clear when Chris put it to him, but clear as in no games. It probably means that you can go a little bit stronger than maybe you could if this game was sandwiched with 2 others or whatever. The fact that again they've got another week before they go to Wrexham, I think is a bonus. Paddy, we won't get your score prediction in terms of the starting lineups when they drop. So very early and just over 48 hours out from the game. How do you see it going on Sunday? I mean, Norwich City quite simply have to progress, don't they?
They do. I mean, Walsall are going well in League Two, so they're going to be full of confidence. I haven't checked.
Could be a league fixture next season.
Oh yeah, that's just you all over. That is Connor. Always glass half empty. But I don't think it'd be the easiest assignment. I mean, my mind goes back to, was it Bristol? Was it last season or season before when Bristol Rovers came there?
Season before, yeah.
That turned into quite a grueling affair. It was Brighton last year, wasn't it? And there wasn't really a contest on that one. But and then there was an unwanted replay. Obviously, we're spared that this time around in terms of the Bristol parallel. But I could see it being competitive. Yeah, I could see it being competitive. But you would like to think, particularly for me, off the back of Watford, off the back of Stoke, having built up that real store of Carrow Road goodwill, what had gone before at the start of the season felt like it'd been washed away. They'd almost broken the seal, and the sense is they've kind of regressed a touch. So for that reason alone, because they're going to need Carrow Road to be every bit as tough for Championship opponents from here to the end of the season, that they just pick it up again and they keep the hammer down if they get themselves in front and, go and score 2 or 3. So I'm going to go 3-1 Norwich and a happy household in my house.
Lovely stuff, yeah, and hopefully all done within 90 minutes as well, which for work purposes would be really useful as well. So if that could happen, Philippe, that would be very useful if you're watching. That probably just about wraps it up. We've been going for about an hour now. We've, I think, covered every detail that we could on the transfer front. Looked ahead to the FA Cup game as well. And, of course, we will be at Carrow Road on Sunday. I'll repeat that, Sunday, 2:30 kickoff. It'll be 1:15 that we are live, me and my colleague Samuel Seaman, bringing you the team news for that game. And we will have all of the updates, analysis and reaction to what unfolds at Carrow Road in the FA Cup as well. And as Paddy said, we'll be down at Colney tomorrow afternoon at 1:30. So a date for your diaries for Philippe Clement's pre-match press conference as well. Thank you very much for joining us on this Friday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your Saturday as well. A rare Saturday off for us. And we will catch you again in the next one. See you soon.